Right, so still Thursday 27th of October, but by the time you're watching this, by the time I've uploaded it, it will be my birthday, so happy birthday to me. I am 38. So, carrying on Speyside, carrying on alphabetical order, the next one on the list is this particular one, which is, you would have seen on the title sequence, Allt-A-Bhainne. It's Allt-A-Bhainne is the pronunciation, and it's the distillery is here. We've just done Allt-A-Bhainne. We did Allt-A-Bhainne yesterday, and it's slightly south of that, almost on the same road, not particularly far away at all. And it was a distillery. It's a relatively new distillery in terms of particularly Speyside, that was built in 1975 by Seagrams, and it's essentially a factory to make single malt whisky for predominantly Chivas Regal and the other blends. It's Allt-A-Bhainne is Allt-A-Bhainne is Gaelic for milk burn. Burn of milk. Burn being more a kind of, how do I describe a burn? It's kind of like a stream, not really a river, it's more like a stream. It's where the of milk comes from, I've absolutely no idea, but that's what the name is. It was actually the fourth distillery that Seagrams had built, which were all purpose built to produce more whisky for their blends. It was then bought by Pernod Ricard in 2000. They mothballed the distillery in 2002, but then with a view of making more premium blends and going a bit more at market, they then reopened the distillery and production commenced back in 2005. Now, Chivas Brothers essentially own Allt-A-Bhainne for Chivas Regal, who are part of Pernod Ricard, and they don't have a distillery on Islay, so they don't have any they don't have their own source of peated whiskies to do kind of smokiness in the blends that they've got. So about half of their output from Allt-A-Bhainne is actually lightly peated, not massively so, but enough to give it some kind of gentle smokiness. This particular bottle it's called the Single Malts of Scotland. It's a 21-year-old. The bottle looks like this, and this was actually a release in I think it was late 2013, early 2014, by Specialty Drinks. So I'm pretty certain an offshoot of the Whisky Exchange, and I think it basically was released at the whisky show that they run. The Whisky Exchange don't have it for sale, they're out of stock, but Master of Malt are selling it, and it's 73 quid a bottle. This was very kindly donated by a gentleman called Kevin Tapp, who contacted me saying, I've got some samples, is there anything you want? So Kevin, thank you very much for this, much appreciated. It was distilled in January of 1992 and then bottled in September of 2013. Now, Allt-A-Bhainne is there isn't really any official bottlings of it. It's quite hard to even find unofficial bottlings of it, independent bottlings, simply because they need so much for Chivas Regal and Royal Salute and things like this. So it's difficult to find Allt-A-Bhainne on its own as a single malt. It's out there, but it's tricky to find. Let's find out if it's actually worth getting hold of it, and I'd be interested to see whether there is any smokiness in it. And this is also 50.2%, so cask strength I'm willing to bet. But it doesn't smell 50.2%, that's interesting. Quite light, actually. What I don't know is what they're matured in, whether it's sherry casks or bourbon casks or anything like that. Difficult to say, really. I would guess, because it's quite a light colour, and I'm willing to bet no colouring's been added to this. I'm willing to bet with that colour it's probably sherry rather than bourbon, because bourbon tends to make it a little bit darker, particularly at a 21-year-old. It's pretty light for a 21-year-old at cask strength. But it's light and fresh on the nose. It's very unusual. It's really kind of candy floss and kind of soft mints. Not garden mint, kind of like minted sweets. There's a slight grassiness on there as well. This is surprisingly delicate on the nose, not what I was expecting at all. I wouldn't have put that at 50.2%. There's a real sweet mouthfeel to it as well. It's very, very silky indeed. Almost thick, almost syrupy. And it does have a kind of golden syrup texture to it Most unusual. There's not a huge amount on the palate, and it's difficult to pick up any smokiness in it, to be perfectly honest. But it's very, very syrupy. I don't think it needs water, even at 50%, because I don't feel like any alcohol is masking any underlying flavours. Now there we go, we get a bit more. There's a very, very gentle smokiness to it. But it feels like it sits on your tongue and slides down the back of your throat. It almost doesn't feel like you can swill it around your mouth. It is very syrupy, and it's a lovely sweetness, but it's not cloying, it's not sickly, it's not artificial. But it's really, really sugary, but not quite, it's not liqueur, it's not dessert whiskey. This would do as a dessert whiskey, but it's not like it's a liqueur whiskey where it's got that sugar content added into it to really sweeten it down. The heat from the alcohol actually works really well. There is a slight smokiness to it that's just lifting everything up. That's really nice, really nice. This syrupiness sits and lingers on the finish as well. You swallow, but it still feels like it's sitting on your tongue, as though there's still a residue of it that's still there. It's a lovely, it would work as a dessert whiskey. You might want to add a little bit of water in it just to take a little bit of the bite off if you were having it after dessert. But it's really, really good. There is it's a sort of like half syrupy, but above it, kind of like floating around the rest of your mouth. Almost as though the syrup's sitting on the bottom, and then these flavours come around where it's kind of a very light smokiness. There is a freshness to it. There's almost a slight grassiness. There is the heat from the alcohol as well, but it works really well. It's not like two disparate flavours. It's actually very, very interesting texture. I'm really impressed with that. Really impressed with that. It's not an obvious Speyside, but then it's hard to say there are obvious Speysides, because you really can't lump Speysides with being sherried and malty, and Highlands being kind of, you know, more sherry element, whereas the maltiness is on Speyside, and all Islay is smoky, and all Lowlands are really light and easy to drink. But it would be difficult to pick out where that came from, particularly with this thick mouthfeel to it. That's really good, really, really nice. And 73 quid for a 21-year-old at cask strength is not a bad price. Not a bad price at all. I think it's single cask as well. I think there's only about 280 bottles, something like that. I could be wrong, probably am, usually are. But that is worth checking out. And if Allt-A-Bhainne is like that generally, then that is a distillery worth trying to find, because that is a very, very distinctive, slightly unusual but very pleasant style of whiskey. Easy to drink. This syrupiness, it might be a slightly too syrupy for some people, and not kind of smoky enough or not quite powerful enough. But as something delicate, as something after dinner, after a kind of a light meal, that is not too shabby at all. Right. That's technically my birthday over, because when I get on to the next one, which I'm about to do, it's not going to be my birthday anymore. Boo. Right, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.